might as well start getting started on the first book I've decided to give you guys to read. And it's one of my all-time favorites. I have long been, ever since I was a kid in junior high school, probably my favorite author of all time has been Gordon Corman. The stuff he wrote in the 80s and probably into the early 90s, primarily for young adults and the like, is just some of the funniest stuff I've ever read in my life. And if there's one book that would be, and How You Reap Graham, glad you could tune in for this. If there's one book that probably is right there among the top of even the funniest stuff even he did, it would be Son of Interflux. And over the next, whoever knows how it's going to be, I'm going to be reading this off to you in chapters at a time. And hopefully the way I'm trying to do it, because I'm going to try to bring a little bit of my acting skills into this. And I'm just hoping that this is going to be at least somewhat of an entertaining distraction for you all. So let's get started with Son of Interflux. Newstime Magazine, October 23rd, 1985. Just a few days before Marty McFly went back into the past. That wasn't actually in there, but... Interflux, now world's largest corporation. I may have to take off my glasses for this. I mean, I actually see better up close and stuff like this without my glasses, to be perfectly honest. According to a poll recently published by a London consulting firm, the international manufacturing giant Interflux is now the largest and richest corporation on the planet. There are virtually no Americans who have not heard of the name Interflux. Most, in fact, have not only heard the name, but have in some way experienced the awesome power wielded by this company. Surprisingly few, however, can name a single product manufactured by the largest corporation in the world. And this is for good reason. Since Interflux does not manufacture things, but rather parts of things. The company was founded on one principle. For every 2 useful things in the world, there is the need for a third thing, useless by itself, to make the useful things even more useful together. Interflux got its start in 1807 with the development of the toilet seat. There was the seat, and there was the toilet. An unnamed young inventor, sponsored by the Montrose family, designed the device that connected the two, and an empire was born. The enterprise quickly expanded to include a new generation of buggy whips, making neither the handle or the whip, but the little thing that held the two together. Interflux was fortunate enough to hold 99-year worldwide exclusive patents on these 2 items, so that by the time the patents ran out, the company had the financial resources to go into useless trivia in a big way. With the invention of the automobile, Interflux began to manufacture 12 distinct mechanical parts, not one of which was considered significant enough to ever make a schematic design published by any auto company, but without which no car could operate. Similarly, Interflux soon acquired 75% of the world's ballpoint pen business, making not one pen, but turning out billions of tiny balls for the ballpoints. The list grew by leaps and bounds, and mammoth manufacturing plants sprang up like mushrooms all over the globe. Interflux, a company which had still yet to make an item complete, slowly and steadily made itself absolutely indispensable to the smooth running of modern society. It now manufactures the central pin that attaches hands to all clocks and watches, the cardboard casings for photographic slides, parts of light bulb filaments, the metal crescent on dial telephones that stops the dialing finger. Boy, does that make this thing dated. 7 tiny parts of a machine used exclusively for stitching baseballs, and over 15,000 other varieties of vital non-essentials. Perhaps most insignificant and profitable on this impressive tally is the sole product of the large Interflux installation in Greenbush, New York, zipper teeth. In fact, Interflux controls a staggering 94.4% of the world's zipper teeth market, boasting that for every hamburger served by McDonald's, the Greenbush plant alone produces more than 20,000 zipper teeth. The Long Island zipper teeth mecca is soon to become Interflux's new head office in a massive expansion program which will bring many of the company's top brass to the area. Perhaps from this new nerve center, Interflux will take its next great step and produce an actual finished item. Chapter 1. The black and red Firebird Trans Am had been a gift from his parents for his 16th birthday. It tooled down the highway at just under 50, white wall radial singing on the wet pavement. Through the late afternoon drizzle, his eyes made out a road sign which read, Greenbush, New York, home of Interflux, a good neighbor. Simon Irving winced. Interflux. Every place he'd lived had had that same sign. The part about the good neighbor had been his father's idea. After all, who had more right? He was the senior executive vice president of Interflux International, the world's largest and most useless corporation. He turned off at Schuyler Avenue and drove through a massive housing development of identical little boxes which stretched as far as the eye could see, each finished in Long Island modern and carefully placed in the center of its own little patch of crabgrass. Beyond that was the large Interflux installation, soon to be a whole lot larger. That was what the Irvings were doing there, not living in Greenbush, but in adjacent Fosterville, which looked exactly the same. Past Interflux, the land was, for the most part, undeveloped, with the exception of small clusters of older established homes. It formed an attractive setting for the Nassau County High School for Visual, Literary, and Performing Arts. Simon pulled into the parking lot and nosed the Firebird into the first available space. The school was an ultra-modern, low, rambling building, its roof dotted with skylights. The land around it was flat and green, stretching up to the fringes of a large wooded area to the north, the Interflux property to the east and south, and on to the west a small shopping center marking the limits of yet another town, DeWitt. Locking the car, he strode determinedly towards the main entrance, whistling nervously through his teeth. The admissions interviews were being held in the office area. Simon was 20 minutes early for his appointment, so he took a seat in the waiting room in a crowd of hopeful young students. By now, Emile Carrada had over a week to examine his art portfolio. This, then, was the moment of truth. If Carrada hated his paintings and threw him out on the street, his father would interpret this as a dead end in art leading to a bright future in Interflux. Simon set his jaw. It must not be. He was good. He knew he was. But would that win him a spot in Carrada's small, hand-picked painting seminar? A secretary up in front of the group consulting a list in her hand. Is Simon Irving here? She drawled. No, my mistake, I just screwed that up. What she actually said was, is Irving Simon here? She drawled. Simon stood up. That's Simon Irving. Biggest gag of this book, and I fucked it up off the spot. Sorry, everybody. Whatever, Mr. Carrada will see you now. As Simon approached the department head's office, the door opened to reveal a young girl sobbing into a large handkerchief. She brushed by him and ran out of the building. Squaring his shoulders, Simon entered. Emile Carrada, 6 feet 8 inches tall with a long wispy beard and burning wild eyes, was a fearsome sight. Wide-eyed, Simon eased himself into the chair the artist indicated. You are Irving Simon? Simon Irving, sir. There seems to be some misunderstanding. It does not matter. Carrada has looked at your work. I'm very impressed. Simon couldn't hold back a foolish grin. "Thank you, sir." And then Karada blew his stack. "Don't thank me!" the artist bawled, standing up and waving his arms in the air. "You think this is good news? No! This is a curse! I honestly wish I could tell you that you stink and let you get on with your life!" He sat down, breathing hard. "But you chose to be one of my students, which means you have no life!" "Well, this is what I was hoping for, and too much work, too much sweat, too much pain," said the artist abstractedly. "Is it all worth it?" "Well, Simon began. "Stop!" snapped Karada, thrusting out a large hand as though directing traffic. "That question must never be answered! And you, Mr. Simon, will work more than any of your friends or acquaintances. You will curse Karada on a regular basis. Congratulations, and I'm truly sorry." Dazed, Simon took the proffered hand. I'm accepted then? "Let me tell you a story. When I was in Bologna, I knew a very brilliant and talented artist who had only one problem. He asked stupid questions. When a person was overcome with joy at his work, he would say, 'It's all right then?' One day he asked one too many stupid questions, and someone shot him. Yes, you are accepted," he scowled. "Even though we stress art as much as we possibly can, the state insists that you also receive a high school education. It must never interfere with your painting. On the first day of school, you will register for all that irrelevant stuff. Here is something else to bear in mind. 7 times in the last 8 years, a Karada student has won the New York State Vishnik Prize. Last year, a creep from Albany won. This year, it will be a Karada student again, or I will know the reason why! Welcome to my class. Next! Another boy came in, and Simon supposed that his interview was over. He all but fled, restraining his ecstasy. Now he could go home and tell his parents he'd been accepted at Nassau Arts. So much for Abercrombie Prep, which led to Harvard Business School, which led to Interflux. Giddy with exultation, he stopped beside the Firebird and couldn't resist thumbing his nose at the tallest Interflux smokestack, presently belching filth all over Greenbush, just within the legal limit, of course. An amused voice came from a few feet down the line of parked vehicles. I see you're a big Interflux fan." Simon wheeled, flushing to the roots of his fair hair. Standing beside a battered, ancient orange Volkswagen Beetle was a slender boy with dark curly hair and an engaging smile that radiated the highest degree of friendliness. Simon grinned sheepishly, mumbled something about it being a long story, and got into the car. He switched on the ignition, but the only result was a low-power hum. He tried again. Same response. Disgusted, he got out of the car, lifted the hood, and peered inside. A few vehicles down, the ancient Beetle roared into action in a small blue cloud of burnt oil. The car backed out, leaving a trail of flaked rust in its wake, and came to a creaky stop behind the Firebird. The dark-haired boy leaned out the window. "Sounds like your plugs are wet to me." "Oh," said Simon, managing to convey his helplessness. I don't want to sound stupid, but what do I do?" The dark-haired boy pulled a rag from his lidless glove compartment, got out of his car, and approached the Firebird. "Name's Phil Baldwin," he said, drawing off the plugs and points. "Nice car. There, that ought to do it." "Simon Irving, thanks." The two shook hands, and Simon came away with a handful of grease. "Oops, sorry," Phil said. "The wreck's not clean, but it gets me where I'm going. I saw you inside in painting. Is it a yes or a no?" "I'm in. How about you?" "I got a conditional acceptance in sculpture," said Phil. "They say my stuff isn't any good as it is, but that I show a lot of potential." "That's pretty good," Simon approved. Well, not exactly. You see, I show potential for a lot of things, but I don't usually deliver." "Pardon?" "Well, it all started when I was 5. I showed the promise to be a concert pianist, but by 9 I was all thumbs. I was going to be a child model, but then my nose grew faster than the rest of my face. They had me pegged for chess master, too, because I was wiping up the competition at 10 years old. I still play like the best 10-year-old in the business. It's the story of my life. I've got hopes, but I don't intend to be crushed if I bomb out at scalping, because I've been down that road before. That's a good attitude, Simon said politely, not knowing what else to say. Tell me, do most of the kids enter Nassau Arts at the beginning of high school? I'm in 11th grade. My family just moved here. You should be alright. They come in at all levels. I'm in 11th too. I did 2 years at Greenbush High. It's a write-off. My next door neighbor's been here since freshman year. He's in painting too. Sam Stavrinidis. His real name is Soterius in Greek. He's co-owner of the Wreck. He smiled. As you can see, we're both a little short of cash. I just failed up to live up to my potential as a short order cook, and Soterius had loaned the bundle on a lot of art supplies. He's a really cool guy. I'll introduce you. Anyway, I better get going. My family eats early because my brother works the night shift at the plant. You mean Interflux? Simon asked weakly. Yeah, the very same. My dad used to work there too. That's why I couldn't resist when I saw you saluting the point. That's why when I saw you saluting the plant, I couldn't resist sticking my nose in. You got some kind of beef, or are you just an ecologist? A little bit of both, Simon said evasively. Well, anyway, I'll see you Monday morning at registration. Soterius says it's a mess. He jumped in his car and rattled off, waving out the window until he was out of sight. The Firebird started on the first try, much to Simon's relief, and he turned out of the parking lot headed for home. The fact of his acceptance at Nassau Arts flooded all over him again, providing a feeling of security as he drove past the Interflux plant and took the highway towards Fosterville. He hoped his father wouldn't be too upset at the news. His dad really was a great guy, except for his total devotion and unwavering loyalty to Interflux. Simon sighed. Luckily, Phil Baldwin jumped around from subject to subject so often that the real reason for Simon's disrespectful gesture toward the smokestack had never come out. He certainly didn't want to go through school wearing the tag Son of Interflux. He was determined to fit in at Nassau Arts. Hi, Mom! Hi, Dad! I'm home! Guess what? I was accepted at Nassau Arts! That's wonderful, dear, called Mrs. Irving from the kitchen. Wash up and join us in the dining room. Dinner's almost ready. Mr. Irving was already at the table. He was very much Simon's father, a fair-haired man of medium height and build who radiated the confidence of his executive position. As was his custom in the evening, he had abandoned his hand-tailored business suit for more casual sports clothes. Congratulations, son. Simon could see his father wasn't too thrilled with the news, but was trying to put a good face on things. He appreciated the effort. Mr. Karada seemed to really like my work. Get ready for a surprise, called Mrs. Irving from the doorway. Vegetarian lasagna! She entered the dining room and placed a steaming casserole dish in the center of the table. We're not vegetarians, Simon felt moved to point out. I read an article in a new local paper, The Sun, she explained, seating herself opposite her husband and doling out massive portions of what looked like pasta, ketchup, and cottage cheese. Executives your father's age are prone to heart disease. We don't eat enough healthy foods. Quite right, too, agreed Mr. Irving, settling straight into his dinner. He flashed Simon a crooked grin and unobtrusively held up 3 fingers, which Simon knew was the signal for, meet you at Burger King in 3 hours. This was a common occurrence with the family, as Mrs. Irving was quite prone to sudden dietary experiments and general health kicks. These usually only lasted a few days, but there were notable exceptions. Simon could remember 25 straight days of bran, during which time he and his father had dropped a small fortune into the coffers of Howard Johnson's. The manufacturers of Kaopectate had fared pretty well, too. Isn't it delicious? Beamed Mrs. Irving. Her husband nodded enthusiastically, while at the same time changing his signal to only 2 fingers. Simon nodded his understanding. Even 2 hours would be a painful wait. So, Mrs. Irving said conversationally, tell us about the famous Mr. Karada. Simon thought a moment. How would you describe Karada? He's a little tough to figure out, but I think I'm going to enjoy working with him. He's really somebody, you know. He's exhibited in all the best galleries and museums. I'm very impressed, said Mrs. Irving. And how about you, Cyril? How was your day? Her husband's brow clouded over. Don't ask. The flake is on the loose again. Simon stifled a grin. The Flake was his father's name for Kyle Montrose, the president and chairman of the board of Interflux. If there was a flaw in the Interflux empire, it was Montrose, who had inherited his position along with 32% of the company 10 years earlier at age 22. The spoiled son of a fabulously wealthy businessman, Montrose cared nothing for his company except that it provided him with the money to lead the wild and reckless life of an international playboy, topping gossip columns with his celebrated antics. The embarrassment invariably fell on Interflux and lay on the heavy shoulders of Mr. Irving, who always claimed that his true function was not running the company, but absorbing all the hard knocks so that everybody else would be free to run the company. He had come to dread Montrose's every move. "I thought he dropped out of sight for a while," said Mrs. Irving. "He got bored with his retreat in Indonesia and decided to take on a little London nightlife. He attended a Royal Gala Command performance of the London Ballet where he acted wholly inappropriately." "Good heavens, what did he do?" "Well, he acted in a way as to draw untoward attention to himself." Simon spoke up. "Come on, Dad, this isn't a press conference. Tell us." Mr. Irving flushed. "If you must know, he mooned a duke and 2 earls. I was on the phone with reporters all day. You know those London tabloids? They eat you for breakfast. Why don't things like this ever happen to IBM?" Simon stared into his plate to hide his laughter, but all he saw was his leftover lasagna. He consulted his watch. 1.5 hours to Burger King.